Good evening. I'm Alice Bloom, and I'll be your host tonight for LMC TV's live election night coverage. We know you're tired. We know you're weary, and that your plans may not include us, but we hope you'll stay with us or come back frequently. We know you're following the presidential election race, and bigger news organizations are the go-to places for that coverage. But we'll try to keep a running scroll of results so you can stay up to the minute during the time you do spend with us. Here, we're watching most closely the races for New York State Senate in the 37th Senatorial District, where incumbent Democrat George Latimer faces a challenge by Republican Rye City Council member Julie Killian. We're looking for results in the race for Westchester County District Attorney, where Republican Bruce Bendish and Democrat Anthony Scarpino face off to succeed Janet DeFiore. And most important to our viewers, we'll be bringing you up-to-the-minute returns in the village of Mamaroneck, race for trustee. The only incumbent in that race is Democrat Leon Potok, running for a third term. He has two new running mates this year, Victor Tafur and Keith Waitt. On the Republican ticket is Dennis Cuccinella, Maria DeRose, and Malte Stockart, each making a first bid for trusteeship. Daniel Gallagher is running unopposed to keep his position as judge in the village. And in case you didn't notice, there are two referenda on the ballot where voters are asked to undo a 2010 change to village law by returning to the entire Board of Trustees the power to appoint members of the Planning Board and Zoning Boards and village attorney. And last but certainly not least, Steve Otis is running unopposed for a third term as New York State Assemblyman in the 91st District. Steve will be our first guest tonight, and we've lots to talk about. Rhinebeck High School students will be here today to talk about their mock presidential debate. You'll see a portion of my conversation taped earlier with members of the Mamaroneck Industrial Area Advisory Committee and Village Manager Rich Slingerland. And Tom Murphy will be here a little bit later to help me bring you the results of the village election, always with his unique perspective. At the conclusion of the village's election, when all the counting's done, we look forward to a chat with the candidates who will be joining us here in the studio for a recap of the election. Meanwhile, we're depending on our reporters at candidates' headquarters to keep us informed minute by minute about the results in the village election, so stay here. We have Alexandria Garcia and Matt Moretti, who are at Democratic headquarters. Kayla Coughlin and Matt Sullivan are at Republican headquarters. And there will always be surprise guests and unexpected events throughout the evening, so we hope you'll stay with us. So let's get started. We're going to start first with a look at community events airing in November and December. This was taped earlier. And when we return, Steve Otis will be here.
Hello everybody, I'm Kat Galliano. Get ready to check out a sample of the programs airing during the month of November. Happy 125th birthday, Larchmont. If you missed any of the festivities at the street fair, no worries, LMC was there to cover it. Feel like checking out some interesting art at the Arts Festival? Or maybe just want to see yourself on TV? Window paintings, costume parades, spooky crafts, haunted houses, and much more. Check out what the Village of Mamaroneck Spooktacular had going on for Halloween this year. Keeping up with the Halloween theme, the Village of Larchmont hosted its annual Ragamuffin Parade. There was a record turnout this year with families and pets showing off their Halloween gear. To catch all the fun, tune in Monday nights at 11 p.m. or Tuesday morning at 11 a.m. Do your children know what to do in case of a fire? The town of Mamaroneck Weaver Street Firehouse opened its doors to the public for fire safety prevention, tours of a simulated smokehouse, fire trucks, food, and fun. Now you know what's coming up in November on LMC TV. To see our full broadcast schedule, visit us on the web at lmctv.org/schedules. Airtimes are subject to change. Some popular programs are coming up in December. To look out for are the Village of Mamaroneck's Turkey Trot, the Tree Lighting Social, the Mamaroneck High School Financial Aid Workshop, and oh, a favorite of mine is Sunny Goldberg's annual Know Your Neighbor Holiday Edition. Sunny takes us to the streets, visiting local shops and boutiques in search of the perfect holiday present. You don't want to miss it. Watch us on TV or catch us online by logging into www.lmctv.org.
Welcome back, and as promised, Steve Otis is here. Steve, congratulations upon your re-election.
Well, thank you, Alice.
You had a tough campaign this year.
Well, you know, I feel fortunate that once in a while you run and you don't have an opponent. The important thing is that I work very hard to get along with all the local officials in the communities I represent, and hopefully that hard work is some reflection of the fact that I didn't have an opponent this year, but I'm working on issues with each of the communities that I represent.
Well, we get a chance to talk about that a little bit. So I know that work doesn't stop just because it's campaign season. So what's your priority right now?
Well, my biggest priority is the Clean Water Grant Program that I helped create in 2015. And we're trying to grow it. It's now from zero at the beginning of 2015. It is now worth $425 million statewide to provide grants to municipalities to help pay for clean water projects like pipes and catch basins and expensive stuff that really municipalities could not afford to pay for on their own. So I came up with a proposal with a colleague of mine, another former mayor, to create this grant program, and it has been a huge success. Big support from Governor Cuomo and his environmental agencies, big support from Carl Hastie in the State Assembly, and we're working on growing the program. In fact, we're going to be having a press conference on November 16th in Mamaroneck to promote expanding the program even more next year.
Well, viewers at home would be asking, what will that do for us here in Mamaroneck? That's where our viewing audience is.
There have been 2 rounds of grants awarded so far, and I'm pleased to report that the Village of Mamaroneck was the recipient of the 2016 grants for clean water project that they're working on.
What does that translate into in dollars?
$250,000, and it's a percentage of the project cost. So you get more if you have a more expensive project. But next year, I expect the town of Mamaroneck is going to be applying in conjunction with the city of New Rochelle for a project. The village of Portchester, I expect, will be applying. It's a competitive process, and but you also, even though the project, the grant program will be in its 3rd year next year, it's not so easy to put together an application. You really have to do the engineering work and design work before you put in the application.
So an application, for example, the Village of Mamaroneck would be asking for money to redo sewage pipes?
That would be a typical project,
okay.
and catch basins. They're basically clean water projects. And around here, but all over the state, they're often required by either EPA or DEC. It's work that municipalities have to do, but really have been pushing off because the old way of funding these was to pay for it 100% with debt, which means 100% on the property tax. So the beauty of this program is generally 25%, sometimes more, of the project cost is going to be taken up by state grants, and I am thrilled with all the support around the state. And but we need, working with local governments and construction groups and environmental groups, we're continuing a coalition to promote expanding the program with even more money.
Well, I think everybody here will be happy to know that, and happy to know that their tax dollars won't be used for, or won't be taxed quite the same way. There were so many issues that came up, mostly because the senatorial race was contested. We got to hear a lot about it. But of course, you did get to make some comments at the candidates' night that the League of Women Voters sponsored a week or 2 ago. There were so many interesting topics, but one that really affected me was the need for more involvement in substance abuse in our communities. And that's a subject we haven't, and we know we have Radar, and I know Rise City has some very fine programs as well. But I think this is a problem that's hitting home much with a whole lot more clout than people expected. I've heard of a number of very serious incidents and even deaths in young adults because of heroin or opioid addiction or use. And that's not something that we really had heard about here in these communities.
Well, it actually is something that is a nationwide problem, and it's a very disturbing problem that the legislature has passed a number of pieces of legislation this year and in the last 2 or 3 years, many of which I was able to co-sponsor, to try and address different aspects of the issue. I'll give you one example. There's now a limitation on your first prescription that a doctor gives you for an opioid, on how many days you can be prescribed, because there's a concern that people get addicted because they maybe are overprescribed after a surgical procedure or some other needed use, and so it is now 7 days rather than the old rule was, I think, 30 days. My best friend in the Assembly actually sponsored a bill. He's a pharmacist. He was my friend, my partner in the Clean Water Grant Program. His name is John McDonald, but he owns a family pharmacy, and he actually proposed a bill to make it 5 days. But a big chunk of this problem is people getting addicted somewhat innocently, and then they're on a very treacherous trail to other kinds of drugs, and that's how we're getting the tragedies. Not just in Mamaroneck, but this is happening in Westchester and around the state and around the country, and we really have to go at it from a number of different dimensions.
Well, I know that in Larchmont, Mamaroneck, we have Radar, which is a program in our schools that does a wonderful job at educating students and trying to keep kids out of trouble. I think a challenge to them is sometimes resistance, or has been resistance, in acknowledging that there is a problem. Do you find that the communities you serve, Mamaroneck being one of them, are willing to accept the fact that there is a problem now?
Yeah, I think part of the problem is, while the victims have often been kids, young adults in their 20s, part of the problem is access to drugs at home, and not, opiates that are prescribed maybe to parents, and somehow it is a mix of tragedy that we have to get a handle on. Mayor Rosenblum also has a committee that he has organized that is dealing with aspects of this in addition to what Radar is doing, and I think they're going to be coordinating more. But I went to a meeting a few weeks ago, and so there were representatives of the schools, there were representatives from the district attorney's office, from the police department. There are many aspects of this, but probably part of it is, again, access to legal drugs that are prescribed and somehow misused. The other big ingredient is, a contributor, is misuse of other kinds of substances that may lead to addiction to these kinds of drugs as well. So we need all hands on deck in the schools
This is a
and the communities.
serious problem, and it affects adults as well who are becoming addicted. There were other issues that came up in the conversation that I think we want to talk about. One was the issue of funding education. I know education is a big part of your agenda, and you care very much about it. And there was some allusion to the fact that money that should be earmarked for Westchester is somehow being diverted to other places, that because of the way leadership works, the way sponsorship for bills or whatever work in the state legislature, that money that could be coming to the schools in Westchester are going to Long Island.
Well,
Is
it's
that
a little more complicated. I think that probably is not a fully accurate way to describe the issue. There's an education aid formula, and the education aid formula generally, a major factor is the value of assessed property in a community. So suburban counties become disadvantaged sometimes in how that formula works. Generally, and this goes back decades, for Westchester school districts to get more aid, the solution is probably not redo the formula, as some might say. The solution is to make sure that there is money going to categorical aids. For instance, more funding towards school districts that have a certain percentage of English as a second language students, and that is a factor in the Mamaroneck School District, where there are kids in the need of language help. Generally, for suburban school districts, that is a better way to increase aid to districts. Over the decades, the number of categorical categories has been reduced with some different changes in the education aid formula. So I've worked on education issues for a long time. When I worked for Susie Oppenheimer, that was a big issue for Susie, very involved with it. I was very pleased this year to get appointed to the Education Committee in the Assembly. I pay a lot of attention to what the particular needs of each school district are, and I meet with the school superintendents on a regular basis, and certainly before each budget session, to make sure that we maximize what we can get in education aid to suburban districts.
Okay. Well, it's a topic that probably requires a lot more time than we have tonight, but there's so many other things I want to talk about. One of the things that you've spearheaded is a change to our 911 response system. Explain what you've done.
Well, I mean, this is an issue for municipalities, for NICOM and the Association of Towns, trying to get a wider gambit of funding streams to pay for 911 service. It's not a new issue, and it's an issue for which there is resistance because, in a sense, people, if the money is going to be charged onto your wireless bill, some of that money is going in other places. Some of that money, in a sense, it would be raising an additional charge if you choose the method of increasing the charge. So it's not, everyone wants 911 to be funded, but how you pay for it is like anything else.
Well, where are the gaps? I mean, it's hard for people to believe, but until probably the early 80s, I don't think Westchester had 911. And it was spearheaded actually by a League of Women Voters member, a lovely woman, yes, who started that. But then, of course, technology has changed so dramatically in the time since then. Few people have landline phones anymore, and an awful lot of homes have cell phones only. Does 911 work? Does it identify the caller's location from a cell phone?
Well, there are a variety of Well, the answer to that question is whether you have your locator on or off. So that is a choice there. But there are ways to charge it. But again, the industry is resistant to that, and that's the issue. But anytime you talk about trying to find new revenue streams for government funding, there's going to be somebody on the other side of the equation. So it's an issue that has been a suburban issue, a suburban legislator issue for many years.
You know, I always wonder, this is changing the topic a little bit, you served as mayor of Rye.
Yeah.
And then, of course, moved up to the state assembly. How did your work as a mayor inform your work as an assemblyman?
Well, you know, I had the advantage of working for Susie Oppenheimer for many years, including the 12 years that I was a mayor. So in addition to getting good mentoring from Susie on how to be a good mayor, because she had been mayor of Mamaroneck, there actually was quite a good synergy during those years that I had my state government hat working for the Senate, and I had my local government hat as a mayor. But once you're a mayor, you always think like a mayor, and so what I really do in everything that I do is try and bring a local government and community perspective to my work in the Assembly. Not all ex-local officials remember where they came from, but I still sort of think like a local official and try and advocate for issues like the Clean Water Grant Program really came out of my experience of knowing how hard that was on taxpayers on local budgets. But I meet with Peter Baines, who's the head of NICOM, on a regular basis to go over different kinds of local government priorities and try and advance those issues where they come up, whether it's in the state budget or other issues. I'm on the local government committee, and it is all...
it all works together.
Yeah.
It's got to be a lot harder because you're covering a much larger area, so you can't be at everybody's block party the way you probably did as mayor. But we're glad that you stopped by tonight. Steve, I know you've got other places to be, but I'm going to ask you to stay right here.
Okay.
And thank you so much for being my guest.
Thank you for having me, and I'd say congratulations to all the people that ran at local and other offices. Winning is nice, but running is a service, and running and having the debate that goes on in the village or at other levels of government is very important about the civic life that we have. And so I say congratulations and thank you to everybody.
Yes, well, I think that we're going to echo that tonight. And certainly in context of the presidential election, it's good to remember that a lot of important things happen locally. Steve, I wish you all the best and look forward to talking with you again. Folks at home, we want to tell you a little bit about LMC TV tonight. So stay with us. We're going to a tape.
as you're watching the Local Live. Stay tuned.
I'm Kat Galliano, and welcome to the Local Live.
The Local Live is a news magazine television program produced by LMC TV. We cover the communities of Larchmont, Mamaroneck, and Waitt in southern Westchester, New York. We go live every Thursday at 7:30 p.m. Our stories are about local politics, issues, and businesses. We highlight community events, varsity sports, local and global trends online, and partner with local pet rescue organizations. In our main segment, we carefully review videos of school board and municipal meetings, then distill the news into each week's top stories. Our popular Roundtable segment features in-depth interviews with local newsmakers and audience participation by telephone, email, and Twitter, encouraging dialogue, conversation, and involvement in community issues, organizations, and events. Our production team is almost entirely volunteer.
We need people who can edit. We need people who can, who want to be reporters.
We recruit TV enthusiasts and students from local schools and colleges. Thus, our youngest producer is 15 years old.
Without these people, there'd be no Local Live.
Our team is trained for writing, reporting, hosting, field producing, shooting, and editing. At LMC TV, we encourage not watching TV, but making TV. So far, we've produced 94 shows, each one aiming higher than the week before. We started with a budget to run for 6 months, but thanks to the commitment from LMC TV's board of directors, staff, and our news team, we have sustained the show for 2 years. Improving our show further requires more funding, and the only way we can achieve that is through your help.
Welcome back. As you can see, Steve Otis is on his way to other headquarters, but we're glad that he got to stop by for a little while tonight. We've lots to talk about, but we have our reporter Alexandria Garcia with us at Democratic headquarters. So let's go to Alexandria. Alexandria, great to see you. How are things doing at Barley's?
So far, everything is really good. We have a huge turnout, a lot of people here, a lot of people anxious and excited. And so we're just waiting, for the results right now. But right now, everybody's having a good time.
Okay, well, polls closed at 9 o'clock. So that was about 15 minutes ago, 15 or 20 minutes ago. Have anybody have anything to say about what the turnout was like today?
Yes, actually a lot. I was talking to Keith Waitt, and he said that there was long lines, especially by where he lived. And he said the lines were even coming to outside. And it was very unexpected that this was just actually a long and heavy turnout of so many people, considering, the presidential election and as well as the local elections.
Right.
Everybody was waiting at least over an hour.
Oh, it's interesting. Did Keith say whether people were focused on the local election as well as on the presidential election?
I think he said it was like a mixture of both, actually. I think a lot more people decided to vote in the local elections simply because of the presidential election, and that encouraged them because everything is obviously in the same ballot. So that was actually a push for them because of the presidential election for everybody to come out and also vote for their local candidates as well.
Interesting. Did he report any kinds of problems at the polls today?
Well, no, besides the long lines and the long waits, I was actually talking to people here, and they were actually telling me that they were more interested in the old-fashioned way where you pull the lever. They didn't feel that it was that organized. Some people said that they felt that it was organized, but other people just felt that it wasn't really organized, and they didn't really feel that it was private. When they were casting their votes, some people that I was speaking to, they just said, I felt like I was casting my vote, and I felt that people could see right over my shoulder. So it was just a mixture of opinion whether people felt that it was private and not really private.
Yeah, it is a little harder. It was interesting when New York went to the optical scanners, we were the last state to adopt a plan, and part of the reason was we held out to make sure there was going to be a paper trail. So it seems like retro, going back to marking ballots with a pencil or a pen.
Exactly, and that's exactly when I was speaking to one of the customers here. He said, he was elderly, and he said, it takes me time. He was like, I was just interested in the old-fashioned way where you just look on the board and you pull the lever, but now when you have to do it on a paper, it's like after you're standing on one line, for your district, then you have to stand on another line as you're writing in the papers,
right.
And then you have to go on another line to scan in your paper in the computer system.
Right.
So it's actually such a longer wait, and it's a longer process, and some people were for it and then some people weren't.
Did anybody report any problems with the optical scanners not working correctly?
No, actually, nobody really had a problem with that, actually.
Good, because I was hearing in New York City there were a number of districts that did have problems.
Exactly. I know there were some in the Bronx that had a problem, Brooklyn. But as far as the people that I'm talking to here, they didn't have really any problems. They were just more interested in the old-fashioned way of voting.
I think one of the most interesting things about voting in a small village like Mamaroneck is you see all your neighbors. And you see all your friends and people you may not have seen for months or longer, and you see them at the polling place.
Exactly. And sometimes you feel that maybe casting your vote isn't really that private, especially with the amount of people that is in the room. And, you know, you think it may be private, and then sometimes it really isn't.
Did anybody see any attempts to watch polls or to interfere with voting at all?
No, actually, no.
That might be an interesting question to ask as more people come.
Yes.
To ask whether there was any kind of interference at all with, you know, with attempts to vote. That was just something we all feared might happen.
Yes.
At all. Well, it's great to know that that there weren't problems in polling places so far. How long do they think it will take before we'll have some results?
Actually, we don't know right now. Maybe another hour or so, half hour. We're not as clear. I know I was talking to Keith Waitt, and he's a little nervous and excited all at the same time, and he's just hoping for the best. We all are. All the candidates here are really hoping for the best.
Yeah, well, of course they are. It's got to be a nerve-wracking time right now as you wait for the results. At my recollection, in the village of Mamaroneck, it's endless for that first half hour after the polls close. And
Exactly.
then some results start to drip in number by number, one district, another district, and then suddenly it's all over.
Exactly.
So, you know,
So right now it's just like a waiting game. You know, we're all waiting for the best outcome possible.
Are all three candidates at Barley's with you? All three Democratic candidates?
So far I know 2 right now.
Okay, so Keith Waitt is there and
And Leon Potok.
Okay, and Victor Tafur is not there yet.
I did not see him walk in yet. Yes.
Okay, yes, because it's a little village. I mean, that's what's so remarkable. And of course, candidates all know that they're welcome to join us in the studio later this evening.
Exactly.
If they can.
It feels like a little family here. Everybody's getting together and talking. The candidates are, you know, mingling. So it's actually a really great feeling.
It's such a lovely restaurant. Are they feeding you all right?
They are. They've been asking us, you know, if we want water, like anything we want, pizza even. You know, I'm full myself, but definitely the crew here is definitely enjoying. So we actually are really having a good time.
Well, you want to enjoy the perks. So, you know, LMC pays you so much that if you get a meal from this, why not? Well, I seem to recall that the owner is a lovely man from Australia. And it's sort of interesting to know what his perspective might be on the election. So you might ask if he's taken any particular polls. So I was in New Zealand recently, and people were very, very informed about the American election on the national level, which surprised us enormously.
On a national level, like all over the world, especially with this presidential election. It's nail-biting to see, even on the presidential level, not only, let alone the local level.
All right. Well, Alexandria, thanks so much. We look forward to hearing from you again. Please call us when you have anything at all to report, and enjoy the company at Barley's.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thanks,
we'll talk
Alexandria.
to you soon.
Talk to you soon. Bye now. Well, welcome back. So that was Alexandria Garcia at Democratic headquarters, which is Barley's on Mamaroneck Avenue. Great location, and very close to the LMC's TV studio. So we're hoping to see some candidates in the studio a little bit later on. We want to tell you a little bit more about LMC TV. So let's go to a tape that was prepared earlier.
Whether you're young or old, you can walk into our studios and learn to be a producer, camera operator, editor, or reporter. We bring together our 3 municipalities, the village and town of Mamaroneck and the village of Larchmont, as well as over 130 volunteers and producers from neighboring communities and municipalities. Our public channel is a shining example of who we are as a community, diverse, talented, informed, and artistic.
LMC TV offers a rich assortment of programs and services for the 2 school districts it serves, Mamaroneck and Waitt. For decades, LMC TV has featured school events as mainstays of our on-air programming. LMC TV also fosters programming produced by our students, including the Mamaroneck High School's daily morning news show, MHS Info. Lights, Camera, Action is LMC TV's after-school club, It's run in all 6 local elementary schools, serving over 100 students each year. In 2001, LMC TV launched its summer teen filmmaking workshops, and the program has been a huge hit ever since, that teach students how to write, shoot, direct, act, and edit in their own short films. One of LMC TV's crown jewels is its varsity sports program. The program hires dozens of local youth to help produce full game coverage of more than 80 Mamaroneck and Waitt varsity sports contests every year.
If you want to find out about the latest resolution voted on by our boards and committees, just tune in to one of the 135 live broadcasts that LMC TV covers each year. LMC TV brings democracy into each and every living room of our community. And if you miss one of those meetings, you can always watch it on the LMC TV website at your own convenience. Looking for a specific agenda item at the Board of the Trustees meeting? You can use LMC TV service to skip to a specific point in a meeting and even use keyword searches to find important items discussed at past meetings.
Posting to LMC TV's digital bulletin board is free and easy. Last year alone, over 700 not-for-profit and municipal events, meetings, and alerts were featured on the LMC TV Community Bulletin Board. Recently, we also stepped up our social media efforts by implementing Twitter as a value-added benefit. Here at LMC TV, we continue to explore new and innovative ways to keep our community connected.
Thanks so much for watching. We hope you enjoyed learning about LMC TV, and we strongly encourage anyone interested in finding out more information about us to visit us on the web at lmctv.org. You can also call us at 914-381-2002. At LMC TV, we don't just watch TV, we make TV. For the Local Live, I'm Rebecca Paganini, signing off.
Welcome back. In case you just joined us, I'm Alice Bloom, and we're at LMC TV's Studio 2, bringing you live election night coverage in the village of Mamaroneck. We have our reporter, Kayla Coughlin, who's at Republican headquarters on the phone. Kayla, great to see you. Well, it looks like you have some company at headquarters now.
Oh, definitely, Alice. There's a whole lot going on here right now. It's full of people, a lot of excitement, some cheering. The numbers are all coming in right now.
Are they starting to come in already?
Yeah, we got a bunch of numbers coming in at once. We have 2 districts reporting right now.
Okay, and do you have any results on those districts?
Yes, as of right now, I have from District 7, for Cuccinella, I have 1,232. For Potok, I have 1,321. For Waitt, I have 1,323. For DeRose, I have 1,328. Stokert, I have 1,215, and Tafur, 1,410.
Wow.
Yeah.
This is very close.
It's definitely very close.
Very close, of course. And these are only 2 districts reporting?
Yeah.
Okay, only 2 districts reporting, and it's a pretty high turnout for the village of Mamaroneck.
Oh yeah, well I've been hearing it all night, both for the presidential and for the local elections. This year, the voters have come out, and record-breaking results have been coming out of voters.
Well, a record number, and I suppose that could be tied to the national election.
Yeah, I think this year is just a big year for people to be more politically aware.
Right. Well, we don't have any real reflection just yet about what the turnout has been nationwide.
Right,
I think those of us who voted today know that it seemed to be a pretty steady turnout. Heavy and steady, and it seemed to persist that way all day, but we don't have any perspective on the nation just yet, and I'm sure we're going to be getting that very shortly. Polls, of course, in New York just closed at 9 o'clock. Well, people behind you look very intent at trying to figure out what the numbers mean, but everybody I'm looking over your shoulder here, and I can see a sort of nail biting happening behind you as people are starting to get more numbers. As I said before, what usually happens is we get a few numbers and a few numbers, and you know it's too close to call anything, and then all of a sudden there'll be a slew of numbers that will come in. So that's great. So are all the candidates with you at headquarters now?
I think a bunch of them all of them are still hanging out here. Again, they're biting their nails as well.
And where are Republican headquarters this year?
Oh, they're at the Elks Lodge.
Okay, another great place. And are they feeding you all right?
Oh, definitely. We're having pizza offered to us. We're having drinks, coffee, donuts, everything. They're taking good care of us.
Well, Mamaroneck's a pretty good eating town, so
definitely.
Yeah, we're not going to worry about you from that. And who's with you as a producer this year?
Oh, I have Matt Sullivan here.
Oh, we know you're in good hands then.
Oh, definitely.
Well, that's just terrific. Anything else? Do you get any sense? I mean, do people seem rather elated, or do they seem very optimistic?
I've had a lot of positive vibes going on. I just spoke a few minutes ago. I spoke with Mayor Rosenblum. He also remarked on the amount of voters that have come out this year, even just for the local elections. A whole lot of voters have come out, but he had nothing but positive vibes. Basically, everybody here just really is trying to have a good night tonight and really keep the positivity going.
Yeah. Now, as far as I know, the different parties don't do any polling. Did anybody talk about any kind of informal polling they might do?
I didn't hear anything. No one's mentioned anything to me.
Yeah, because I know I'm often asked, what's the feeling? What does it look like? And until the night is done, we don't really know.
Exactly. I even asked people, for some just candid predictions, and they themselves couldn't give me anything. They were just saying we're trying to stay positive and wait until it all ends.
Yeah. And let me ask you this: is this your first time at headquarters?
Oh, yes, it is.
Okay, so that's a very exciting time. Are you from the village of Mamaroneck?
I'm not actually. I'm actually from Rockland County. But I've been an intern here at LMC TV, and now I've become one of the producers. And so this is my first election in the village of Mamaroneck, and it's really exciting. And as I mentioned before, it's really warm atmosphere. Everybody's been very polite and very nice. I'm liking it.
Oh, good. Well, I think Mamaroneck has the benefit of being a sophisticated small town.
Oh, I get that. I know exactly what you mean. I get that vibe too.
Right. And what do you think is the attitude towards LMC TV while you're moving around the room?
Oh, everybody, we had nothing but the warmest of welcomes as we walked in. People were, LMC TV is here. They're all excited. People are very friendly. To all, to the production, to our camera person, to myself, they're just so happy to have us here. And we've had a few people come up and mention different packages that LMC TV has produced, and just that they know us. So it's a lot of positive reception to us.
Well, that's really wonderful for all of us to hear. We know that people are generally receptive to LMC TV and open their doors to us. It's been a long time to earn that respect, and we don't take it lightly. We appreciate that. So you're moving around the room, and what kinds of things are people telling you? Does everybody just want to talk about the election, or do they have other things on their minds?
I think right now people are just way too focused on the election.
Yeah. Did you get any sense of what issues were most on people's minds?
I haven't had the chance to sit down with anyone really and talk about. I want to get to ask people about what the number one issues have been, in terms of this election. I haven't had the chance to ask anyone yet, but people just keep talking about how great it is that democracy really seems to be really being pushed this year. How the whole idea of getting out and voting has really been pushed this year.
Okay, all right. And they're not even talking about the presidential election just now?
No, I mean, the presidential election is playing up on the television, but nobody's even paying attention to it. Like I said, as you can see, all the numbers are coming in, and people are way too focused right now on the local elections to even consider.
All right, well, we're going to let you go, move around the room a little bit more, and we know we're going to be hearing from you very shortly with some hard results.
Right.
All right, Kayla, thanks so much. You continue staying in touch. Talk to you in a little while. Bye now. All right, welcome back. That was Kayla Coughlin over at Republican headquarters, the Elks Lodge in the village of Mamaroneck. We've got some great things ahead. We have Rhineck students here to tell us about their mock presidential debate. So let's take a look at a video that was shot of that debate.
All right. Welcome to Rhineck's presidential debate. Thank you all for coming. This morning, our candidates will respond to a variety of questions related to some of the vital issues that face our country today. Being informed and knowledgeable in political affairs is essential to the success of a democratic republic. It is our hope that today's discussion will provide you with a clearer understanding of the candidates' positions and help you make an informed decision when you vote on Monday. Please join me in welcoming our candidates. First, Mr. Donald Trump. And Mrs. Hillary Clinton. Have 1 minute for your response.
Welcome back. We're joined in the studio with two very, very informed young adults, Henri Wang and Emily Crook. Thank you so much for being here. Now, I know you're from Waitt High School.
Correct.
This is a busy year for you. Senior year?
Yeah, college application season.
Oh my gosh, you got your college applications in?
Yeah, for the early decision ones, yeah.
Okay, and you guys are cool? Everything is...
Yeah, so far so good.
Okay, so nobody's heard anything yet?
No. Some have.
Really?
Some of our peers, yeah.
Oh, okay. And good news?
Yeah, all have been accepted so far, I think, yeah.
Exciting. Well, Waitt has a very small senior class.
Yeah, we're only just over 100 per grade, I think.
That's a huge class for Waitt.
I mean, yeah, that's true, yeah.
I remember times when it was under 80.
Really?
Yes,
yeah.
We've been here a long time. 100, wow, yeah. You're coming up in the world. So, we're here to talk about your mock presidential debate. This has been quite an election year.
Yeah,
to say the least.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, do both of you remember the last presidential election?
We were 8th graders then, nice. So I was a bit younger, yeah, not as much.
Well, you were all 4 years younger.
Yeah.
Which is a significant portion of your life, but that's okay. I mean, I assume you remember it, but probably not with the acuity that you have lived through with this particular presidential debate. What's your feeling about the tenor of the conversation in this election?
I mean, it's well, if I remember the one last time between Romney and Obama correctly, this one's got a lot more vitriol involved, I think.
Okay, yeah. I think that's a very accurate depiction. Yeah. Emily, what do you think?
I mean, I would agree with Henri. I feel like there's a lot less focus on the policies. It seems like, and I feel like the media is also really influencing this election.
How
more so. I mean, I guess I see it from like the younger perspective, but it's a lot of misinformation construed, or like the candidates are construed as jokes a lot online, and so that sort of sways people's votes, I see.
And of course we have a lot of social media.
Yeah.
And a lot of tweeting. Certainly by one candidate.
Yeah, maybe one candidate more than the other. Yeah.
More than the other. How do you think that impacts the election as a whole? Emily, what do you think?
I mean, I feel like the social media platforms make it much easier for people to share like their immediate opinions of things, which can sort of be a bad thing, but especially when it can also mean people are sharing such negative opinions of things.
So there's no time really to reflect. People can sort of say whatever's on their mind immediately. Now, you two probably don't remember a time before social media.
I think we were on the very cusp, yeah, because Twitter and all those Facebook, YouTube came out when we were early in elementary school.
Right, so you know, this has been a part of your life. I mean, for most of us, this is a new thing, and we are quite perplexed at how to use it and how to use it effectively. Can you imagine a time without it? Or do you think that it has enhanced voters' understanding of who the candidates are?
I think that's a mixed bag of a question too. I mean, there's definitely a lot more information going around thanks to these platforms, but at the same time, personally in my life, I've found that kids have been misinformed, as a result of social media. Like, oh, I saw this about Trump on Facebook. Oh, I read this about Clinton on even Instagram, maybe. Yeah. So I think social media has impacted our age of voters, and a bit older a lot more than the older ones. But yeah.
Do you think, Emily, maybe you take this one, do you think that your peers are more gullible? That they believe what they read on the internet or on social media?
I mean, I guess it depends on who you're talking to. Like, some kids, I would say, definitely would be more swayed by things that they'd see on social media. But I mean, we're pretty, like, a good school district. Like, people are reading, like, very good publications as well. It's not just like things that they see on social media. So I guess it depends.
Okay. Now, you were both in the debate.
Yes.
You did a mock debate. There were only two candidates. I'm going to assume, Henri, you were probably Trump.
Right.
Is that right? And
it was
Emily?
actually originally going to be the other way around.
Okay.
We did a coin flip for which class would get which candidate, but then when Henri and I were the volunteers, they actually flip-flopped it because it made more sense this way
Did you
around.
have a lot of people volunteering?
No.
No, it was actually just us,
Yeah.
Okay. All right, so just two candidates. None of the third-party candidates participated.
Yeah, that too. Originally, we were going to have Gary Johnson, but we only had one period of time, so yeah, we just cut
So you
that out.
did one debate.
Correct.
Did you find you were emulating the real debates, or were you winging it?
Definitely not. Definitely not in a lot of regards. I was Trump, and I definitely looked into his platform and the way he was running his campaign, but I think I stuck more to the perks of his platforms in terms of the issues, as opposed to, I feel like in the real debates he centers on a lot of ad homs towards Clinton. So yeah.
So you avoided that.
As a joke, I inserted
we did play it for laughs a little bit.
Well, I mean, was the objective to really try to emulate the candidates, or to give you a version of what you'd like them
Definitely
to be?
To emulate them, but I just decided to step away from the ad homs to get the kids more involved, the viewers. Yeah.
Okay. Did you find it hard to be Donald Trump?
No, actually, I consider myself a political buff, so I was pretty clear on how I'm clear on what Clinton and Trump both stand for. So I thought, just had to.
You could get into character pretty easily. And how about you, Emily? Could you be Hillary?
Yeah, when I was we got the questions in advance, so when I was creating the answers for these questions, I sort of just had to make sure that I was using what she would say about the topics rather than more in line with my own policies. Like, I agree with a lot of what Hillary Clinton says, so it wasn't too bad, but I had to make sure that I was using her language about it, I guess, which was the difficult part.
And how did you study her?
I used a lot about her website and quotes that she said in speeches and stuff on the different topics that we were given to research. So I threw in some quotes that she said, or rephrased her words in order to make it very true to what her policies actually are.
Did you use Facebook?
For my research, no.
Okay, and how about you, Henri? How did you research Trump?
Yeah, I guess same with Emily. There was his campaign's website was pretty meted out on the details on his stances on the issues. So that, and also I tried to construct counter-arguments towards my opponent too. So I read both candidates' websites pretty in depth, and I found that they're actually pretty specific on the stances. Yeah, a lot more than what just looking at Facebook would have you think, I thought.
How do you think your depiction of the candidates affected your peers?
Well, I think I affected them more because I was a bit less in character, just because I didn't keep to the ad homs as much. But I think there's definitely a bias already going in, given how each candidate is and what everyone's personal beliefs are. So we actually had an actual like mock election right afterwards too. We kind of voted online. I don't think that our debate swayed it too much, but yeah, I think it was a good exercise to do the mock debate.
Now you say you really toned down some of Donald Trump's ad hominems and things like that. Did you find people said to you, "Oh, gee, you know, I wanted to see you really beat him"?
Yeah, I mean, I was pretty offensive at least on the issues. I think yes, and you know I threw a bone here and there, you know, with the wrong and stuff like that. So.
We only have another minute, but I wonder how did preparing for these debates and actually doing it affect your view of the candidates?
Well, I guess it made me personally more aware of specifically what Hillary's standpoints were on each of the topics. I guess it made me think more about them individually. And we got a lot of comments about how our debate was more of a debate than the actual debate. So we tried to actually learn the facts about each candidate when we're not necessarily getting that a lot with this election.
Well, I look forward to watching your whole debate. Do you think that you convinced Henri that Hillary was the right candidate?
I don't know, Henri.
We're not. You don't have to answer that. That's okay. I wish you both the best of luck in your college pursuits.
Thank you
I
very
hope
much.
you get results. Good results very soon. I'm going to ask you to stay right here. We're going to go to a tape now about Man on the Street, where we had a reporter out in Mamaroneck talking about the presidential debate, the presidential election, and they were. You'll get some very interesting views on both Hillary and Donald. Let's go to the tape.
The 2016 presidential election will be the 58th for the United States. The current President Barack Obama has reached his term limit for re-election. After months of campaigning and debating, the GOP is supporting Donald Trump as its candidate, and the Democrats are supporting Hillary Clinton. Republican nominee Donald Trump is a businessman and television producer. His businesses varies from golf courses to hotels and casinos. His television producing experience includes beauty pageants and other reality TV shows. His running mate for vice president is Indiana State Governor Mike Pence. The Democratic nominee, Hillary Clinton, has served as a congressional legal counsel before marrying Bill Clinton and becoming the First Lady of the United States from 1993 to 2001. She later became a New York State Senator from 2001 to 2009 before her last role in office as the 67th Secretary of State from 2009 to 2013. Her running mate for vice president is Virginia State Senator Tim Kaine. We took to the streets of Larchmont and Mamaroneck to find out what the local opinion about the fate of our country will be on November 8th.
I'm actually going to go vote for Hillary Clinton. I do. I feel that after last night's debate, she really came out, she shined, she was really polished. The way that she answered and responded to Donald Trump in regards to his scare rhetoric, I thought that she was really on point. So she does have my vote for this year's election.
Generally, you have to say the truth, but there are certain things you say in the name of truth, you cause more crisis than you want to solve.
So do you believe that in this election there have been a lot of instances of people, you know, not choosing the right words to say?
Exactly. There have been certain instances like that.
Okay. And at this point, do you know which candidate you are favoring over the other?
Ordinarily, I have Hillary over Trump. I have Hillary. I'm a favor to Hillary over Trump.
I would say Hillary.
Yeah. Why Hillary?
Because she looks that she's more able to do her job correctly.
She seems more professional to you?
Yes, I think she's more serious and she can take the position of president because it's a big position for this country.
Why don't you like Trump?
I don't like him because I think this guy is not prepared. I think he's a good businessman, but he's not a good human being. He's not a guy who can be lead to this country.
Donald Trump, I know that he wants to like kick like all the immigrants out, and because like he says that we're like since like we're Hispanics and stuff. So he's saying that we're doing the like bringing all the drugs and stuff from South America, and I think I agree with Hillary Clinton. She's on immigration. She says that she's like only going to be deporting people from that are like doing bad stuff.
It's tough. It's a tough choice. I wouldn't even know. It's kind of like you're going with a criminal or you're going with like someone who's like who acts like a child, doesn't really know what they're doing. So it's kind of tough.
Donald Trump is a really good comedian.
So you see Donald Trump as more of a like something to laugh at instead of a politician?
I love his jokes, man. He should definitely do stand-up comedy if it fails.
Well, as you can see in the town of Mamaroneck, there are a lot of mixed emotions about this campaign. Hillary Clinton seems to be winning the vote right now, while Trump is taking a lot of abuse, but we're just going to have to wait until Election Day to see what happens. For Local Live and for LMC TV, I'm Kayla Coughlin.
Welcome back. Again, I'm still Alice Bloom, and joining me now is Tom Murphy, Town Councilman, Mamaroneck Town Councilman, and former trustee in the village of Mamaroneck. Tom's here to always go over the numbers with us and help give us some good perspective. Now, when we spoke a few moments ago, we had some very preliminary results, but as it always happens in Mamaroneck, drip, 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 and then it's all in.
Yeah.
Tell us what you've got for us.
Well, we have what looks like will be preliminary final, but this is from when the campaigns go and they open the machines and they read off the numbers. So it hasn't been verified by the county yet, but usually this is 98% of what it's going to be.
It's what we call unofficial results.
Unofficial results, okay.
But they seldom change more than a vote or two.
Well, maybe 50, 60 either way. You got to count the absentee ballots.
But it seldom changes the results.
It's seldom, almost in my history, never.
Okay, so these are you got these from Democratic
I got these from the Democratic headquarters.
Okay.
And it looks like the Democrats handily carried the night.
Wow.
Leon Potok, the incumbent, received 3,487 votes. Newcomer Victor Tafur topped them all with 3,645. Keith Waitt, longtime village resident, 3,498. Mr. Stuckert, 2,733. Maria DeRose, 2,970. And leading the pack for the Republicans is Mr. Dennis Cuccinello, longtime village resident, 2,993. And I've been told that both propositions, Proposition 1 and Proposition 2, passed. Proposition 1 seems to have passed by a count of 2,838 yeses to 1,886 noes. Proposition 2, I was told passed, but I
don't have the numbers yet.
The phone kicked out before we got on the air, and I don't have the numbers yet.
Well, Proposition 1 was the one to pass the power of appointment to village boards, to the land use boards.
For the Zoning and Planning Board.
Zoning and Planning Board back to the entire Board of Trustees.
Correct.
Right now, that power rests in the mayor.
Yes. How it used to work when I was on a board was that the whole board made the decision about who was going to be on the land use boards.
Okay.
All 5 members. Apparently, after I left in 2010, there was a change, and the mayor makes the appointment, and the board votes on that appointment. But the mayor has the power of appointment.
So he makes the power of appointment, but if the board votes against that,
then he puts up another person.
Oh, okay.
But it's always the mayor's prerogative, as it was, of who gets appointed. You know what I mean?
I see. So, but that's the way, before 2010...
Before 2010, it was all 5 members of the board decided.
They decided together. Or people were proposed by various friends or community members, and they looked at a resume, and the board decided. How did it get changed in 2010?
I don't know. I know that there was some change to the law. I don't remember how it happened, and I had been gone about a year, so it was.
Yeah, I mean, it sort of slipped in, and I think many people didn't even know that it had changed.
Right.
But forever before then, it was the power of the entire board to make those appointments.
Now, conversely, the village attorney, that was always a mayoral appointment, subject to the approval of the board.
Okay.
and I think that is Village New York State law. And this is a change to that. This is a home rule change. And now it'll be a vote of all 5 members.
Well, just to muddy the waters a little bit, the village didn't always have a full-time village attorney.
It doesn't now.
Okay, it's a part-time.
It's an outside counsel. It's not an
so we're
employee.
back to an outside counsel.
We're back to an
because
outside
we have had many different iterations of this.
When I was there, I made sure that we had a village attorney who worked just for the people of the village of Mamaroneck and didn't have, in my opinion, didn't have an incentive to get the village into litigation. Okay. Not that a lawyer would ever do that.
No lawyers are just honorable people to a fault. But as a lawyer, I can tell you that. No, but seriously, I think the concern was the very high legal fees that we were paying.
Outrageous legal fees, yes.
Right, and there's always the possibility that they are being
Churned,
churned or germinated by more litigation than perhaps was necessary.
Correct.
So then the village went to a full-time attorney, and then they eliminated that position.
They eliminated that when Mayor Rosenblum got elected, yes.
Okay. I mean, I guess there's arguments for and against. Having a full-time attorney doesn't always provide all the services the village needs.
No, it doesn't. But what it does, and what I thought it did very effectively, was, first of all, it kept you from making a mistake initially, by running things by the attorney before you made actions. And then once there was litigation, you had somebody there who could help you manage the litigation. Because, from my experience when I was on the board, when we were going through, many complicated and vast litigations, I didn't feel that we had an advocate for how to best end litigation, how to best manage litigation. So there was always a motion, or there was always something that we were getting charged for. And having an attorney who just worked for the village and had no interest in, I mean, listen, every attorney works for a firm. It's about the billable hour. And that's just the way it is. And
but there are honorable ways to do that. It is
There
billable
are honorable
hours.
ways to do
I
it,
mean, there
yeah.
are firms that double bill or bill for every phone conversation and every paper
Well, we were
clip.
getting billed for every time the attorney sneezed in the village of Mamaroneck.
Okay. So, but then when we had a full-time village attorney, that didn't work out so well.
Well, it depends on who you talk to. I mean, it didn't work out because she got, Norman didn't want a full-time village attorney, which is his prerogative.
Okay.
But
Okay. We have some other numbers here. I'm just trying to think. Oh, we have some results in the state Senate race. We were looking at that. George Latimer is facing a very stiff challenge, or so he said, in the 37th senatorial district. He was being challenged by Julie Killian, who is a council member in the city of Rye. And we have some results with 11% of districts reporting, so we couldn't call it.
no, you can't tell if it's a big district, it's a little district.
Right, these numbers are still pretty rough.
But it's a formidable lead.
Right, I mean, 50%.
Pretty much, yeah.
Pretty much, where we have 4,796 votes for Ms. Killian, and George Latimer has 8,462 votes. But again, this is really too early to call. Only 11% of districts.
Yes, and we don't know where they're from. I mean, if they're from Mamaroneck and Larchmont, that would seem to pan out because George is very strong here.
Yes.
But Bronxville and Yonkers are traditionally very Republican areas, and George has them in his district.
I couldn't help but I always pull back the numbers from other elections. I'm such a geek. I keep this sort of stuff. I mean, this stuff lives online forever now, now that we have such things. But I pulled out the results of the 2014 election in the village of Mamaroneck, where we had 3 trustees also up for election.
That's fascinating.
And these were the numbers that we had then. Again, these were unofficial numbers. I don't believe that these were the final ones. But look at the difference in turnout. Now,
a much closer race.
Much closer race.
And that is 2014. That's a governor year.
Okay.
So
it's a compelling race, but nothing like what we've seen in this presidential election.
No, I got to where you used to vote in town center.
Right.
And I got there this morning at 5 to 6, and the first time I ever remember waiting online on the stairs that go up to the court.
Right.
For about 5 minutes, went down into the parking lot. Which I usually run. My whole idea. I run in at 6 o'clock. I bang it and then I go to work. But it was the first time I ever had to wait.
Yeah.
So and the numbers are pretty phenomenal. I don't know if
The turnout. So the turnout is actually almost 100% higher.
Oh yeah, without
today
a doubt.
than it was in the
yeah.
2014 election.
Yes.
And that was one where the Democrats prevailed and gained a majority on the board.
Correct. I think they had already had the majority. They retained the majority.
Okay. And this time we have 2 new candidates running.
Yes, Mr. Waitt and Mr. Tafur.
Right. Interesting, and perhaps we'll talk with them later. They are both naturalized citizens.
Yes. Victor has only been a citizen, I think, about a year and a half, 2 years. And I don't know about Keith, how long he's been a citizen. I know he's lived here a long time.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's lived in the community a long time. But yeah, it's interesting, and especially in a year, that you've heard so much about immigration. And here's 2 brand new immigrants who are about to take seats as elected officials.
So how do you think the village of Mamaroneck fares in the context of a presidential race, and especially such as the one we've just lived through? How does that translate into people's reaction locally, do you think?
In a local election? Mm-hmm. Well, obviously you get a lot more turnout.
Okay, more people are energized, more people
are energized, they turn out. And in my, people always say to me, well, who are these people who come out in presidential years? And I always say, well, I can easily identify them. They're Democrats. And they don't come out in odd-numbered years. And they don't come out in governor years. And that's a fault of, something that we're doing in the Democratic Party, that we don't motivate our voters to come out unless it's a presidential year. And I think that the other party is much better at getting their voters out in even-numbered years, odd-numbered years. They have a more faithful voting bloc.
But I mean, that just perplexes me. These people,
Yes.
especially in the village of Mamaroneck, which is a little village, your mayor lives down the street from you. You see your representatives in the village. You go to, not the
store,
movies
the
anymore,
avenue.
but you go to
Yeah.
dinner. And you see people around the neighborhood. You really have the opportunity to know who they are and take their measure.
Yes.
If somebody behaves
And
badly.
A lot of time, you've known them through your children. You know them.
Right,
through,
we were on soccer teams together. I mean, so you get the measure of a person, how they comport themselves in real life.
Correct.
So you would think it would be more likely that people would come out and vote. And
it's unfortunate. It's very disappointing, actually. You would think also that just, if people had an opportunity to make a choice about their government, that they would feel some sort, I know it's not a technical duty, but you would think there'd be some moral duty.
Well, even more than, I totally agree with you, but the taxes paid here are pretty significant.
Sure.
And so you've got a real opportunity to weigh in on how your money is being spent.
Correct.
So it would just seem like the most logical thing in the world to not ignore an election.
For a lot of people, I'd say the majority of people in this community, their house is their biggest investment.
Yes,
a lot of people are hoping to sell their house and retire. That's their nest egg, especially in these times of dwindling 401ks and people who don't have defined benefit pensions anymore. People are hoping to sell their house to finance their old age.
Well, but even while you're living here, it's not only the cost of your house, but you're paying significant taxes.
Oh, sure.
I mean, we know we've had a reval in the town of Mamaroneck, which has affected residents, of course, in the village of, most residents in the village of Mamaroneck. Those who live in the town of Rye also enjoyed a reassessment a few years ago. And for a lot of people, there was a bit of a hit. Not that they would not pay.
Depending on where you live.
Right. Some people, I don't know. I never met anybody whose taxes went down, but I'm told there were a few.
Yeah, because nobody ever tells you when the taxes went down. Yeah.
Tom, since I have you here, there are a couple of issues that came up in the village of Mamaroneck that are really worth talking about. I mean, there are many. But one I'd like to talk about is the proposal to rezone portions of the village. And as I understand it, it's rezoning, downzoning, so that it will stem or at least stall some of the development effort to build bigger houses on smaller lots. But what was alluded to is the changes made in the village of Larchmont and in the town of Mamaroneck. Now, I looked at the village of Larchmont website, and I know that there's a moratorium that I think is still in place.
I think it just expired.
If it expires within the last couple of weeks.
Yes.
Because I know it was, usually you can only renew it for one 6-month period.
You
or
can do it
so.
for 6 months or 3 months. Usually it's 6 months.
6 months, and you can renew it once for a few more months.
Yes.
And I think that's what ran out. But the concern there was a very large parcel of land became available.
Right.
And
40 Ocean Avenue. Yeah.
Right, which had a beautiful old house on it, and it was going to be raised, and 4 houses were going to be placed on that.
I think 2.
Whatever,
Yeah,
the neighborhood was pretty upset about it.
But it is a gorgeous house.
Gorgeous house, gorgeous piece of land. So the community rallied to create the moratorium, but they're also trying to amend their zoning rules to prevent tear downs and to prevent larger houses from being built on smaller lots, better tighten up your setback requirements, things like that. Now, something similar, I think, is being talked about in the village of Mamaroneck, but it's causing an awful lot of anguish.
Well, I think, and I'm not as conversant as some of the people you might have on later, but I think that what scared people is I think the whole board allowed the planning board to come up with changes, and the changes the planning board was coming up was to take the R5 and make it R6.
Right.
So the concern was that many people would be non-conforming. So if you're non-conforming, you have to tell somebody that when you sell the house.
Okay.
If you want to get an addition on your house, now you can't, because you're out of room, as it were, and then you have to go to the
You have
ZBA
to apply for a variance.
which is you might get it, but it's still an extra. You'd rather be unencumbered, right? In my opinion, just from looking at it briefly, and as I can say I'm not an expert on this because I haven't studied it that closely, but it seems to me that they had a problem with some houses and some tear downs and some subdivisions that were problematic. And I understand that, but this is hitting a small nail with a very large hammer.
I see. Well, it's not a done deal. As I
No, it's not a
understand
done
it,
deal.
it's just being talked about.
Yes,
It's
it's a
proposed.
proposed law. Yeah.
Proposed, and as I understand it, all of the land use boards are being asked to convene.
Yes.
And brainstorm on how to proceed. The objective, of course, is to limit the development so that Mamaroneck doesn't look like a community with houses built along the water. I mean, just overbuilt, I guess. And how to do that in the context of not unseating people or depriving people of their legitimate rights.
Right. We moved here. A lot of us moved here because we wanted to have a small town feel. Right. We wanted to have a sense of the community not being really transient. You know what I mean? Where everybody lives in. Apartment life is transient life. People live in an apartment for a few years, they move, as opposed to, especially here in the village of Mamaroneck, you have houses that people have been in them for generations.
Right.
So it gives some continuity to the community, it gives some structure to the community, it provides, a base.
It does, and yet I see it from two sides, because you see some old houses torn down because they're largely unlivable. I mean, in their time, in the late 1800s, maybe they had their day, but they don't conform today's standards.
It's an expensive proposition taking care of an old house. As you well know.
I do know.
Yes.
I do that very well. And living in a community where living here is so highly valued that somebody's willing to come in and take that house, which they find is not rehabilitatable, tear it down and build another handsome house, seems like a very good situation to be in.
Well, yes. I mean, it depends on what's going on. Here's the struggle for every community. You control development, or development controls you. You know what I mean? Because I always, when I look at a developer, I talk to a developer, it always reminds me of the Music Man. This is exactly what this town needs.
Oh, sort of a huckster attitude, yeah.
I know it's going to fix you, kid. And development is good, but the board has to be proactive, and the board has to set limitations, and they have to appoint people to land use boards who will be able to stand up to the razzle-dazzle of developers and give those land use boards the independent evaluations that they need, so that, because a developer comes in and he's got his lawyer and he's got his architect and he's got his engineer and he's got his traffic consultant, And as a small community like this, sometimes you're really outgunned.
Yeah.
I mean, you've been on a plan, but
I did see on the planning board. We had a wonderful board. I mean, a very, very devoted people, completely apolitical.
And let me just say, the boards that we have here, people really try to do their best. And I'm not trying to tear down any board, but it's a hard job, and you have to give them the tools they need to succeed.
I think that you've hit it on the head, because I know I experience problems, or other people do, is when there's ambiguity.
Yeah.
And something becomes a matter for interpretation.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where any aggressive developer will come in and drive a wedge and try to, extract the most he possibly can. Whereas if the law says, the setback is 20 feet, it's 20 feet.
That's why you also have to be very careful when you write your zoning laws.
Yes.
Because they'll drive a truck through.
I remember a conversation with the folks who were developing what's called Town Willow. Avalon Willow, sorry. And they were wonderful developers, wonderful to work with in the
Over on
plan.
Mamaroneck Avenue.
On Mamaroneck Avenue. I think we worked with them for, I want to say, 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
And they were just wonderful. And I remember when they came in, and this is the very end, and said, well, they found out that the height of the building was going to be, I want to say, 5 or 10 inches higher than they were allowed. And the change had already been made to allow buildings of a 50-foot stature on Mamaroneck Avenue. It was slightly raised.
Right.
And they came in and said that the building was coming in at 50 feet and 5 inches or something. And we said, no, it's got to be 50 feet.
Yeah.
You got to figure it out.
Yeah.
And you know what? They did.
Yeah.
They made some slight adjustment. It was only 5 inches.
Right.
The truth is, it probably would not have mattered. But that was the law, and that's what
you approved.
That's what we were paid to approve.
Yeah.
We have so much to pay. We got so much pay. Let's recap for our viewers at home what the results of the election are. We are soon going to have concession speeches from the Republicans in the village of Mamaroneck. But let's go over the numbers again, Tom, since you have them so handy.
Okay, if you're just tuning in, it looks like the Democrats are victorious in the village of Mamaroneck. The lead vote getter for the Democrats is Victor Tafur at 3,645, followed by Keith Waitt at 3,488, followed by Trustee Potok, the incumbent, 3,487. And on the Republican side, Mr. Dennis Cuccinella, longtime village resident, 2,993 was the lead vote getter. Followed by Miss Maria de Rose, 2,970, and Mr. Stuckart, 2,733. And like I said before, these are not the end numbers. I also know that there are 800 absentee ballots, 800 absentee applications went out. I don't know how many ballots went out.
How do you know that?
I got my sources out. I talked to somebody at the Board of Elections.
Okay.
And I guess there's a possibility that if all of them went to one candidate, it might, but that's not going to.
It has never happened. And it is such a wide margin there.
Yeah,
it's not like it's a few votes.
Yeah, if it was 40, 50 votes, then I'd say nobody can declare victory.
Right.
But this is a comfortable margin.
This is a very clear victory, it seems, for the Democratic slate.
Just let me say, for the Republicans who ran, those are respectable numbers in a year like this. And I commend them. It's a hard thing to do.
Yes.
It's a hard thing to do. And I saw them out there walking a couple of times, and they put the work in. And I've been in the winners' locker room, and I've been in the losers' locker room, and it's not a fun place. But they worked hard, and hopefully we'll hear more about them in the village of Mamaroneck in the future.
Well, I always hope so. Because I think that people who run for election come up to speed. They learn a lot. I mean, it may be a particular issue that brings them or motivates them to run, but as you talk to people and you have to learn about your village, and it's always so unfortunate when those people disappear.
Yes.
Because they have learned a lot. They would be wonderful on various committees. I know many people have served on committees. Yes. It's not like they haven't been involved at all. Certainly, Maria has been on parking.
Everybody that ran this year has been on a committee or a board. And volunteered. I think, and I know Dennis long-term volunteer in the village, and Keith and Victor and Mr. Stuckart and Maria, they're all volunteers. So, I hope they keep volunteering, and you never know what happens in the future.
Tom, we have the concession speeches ready to roll from the Republican headquarters. So we're going to go to those, but I'm going to ask you to stay here because there's lots more to talk about. I'd love to talk about voting in New York State. Will we ever see early voting? Think about that.
I'll consider that in the interim. Okay.
All right, let's go to the tape of the Republican concession speeches in the village of Mamaroneck.
All right, can everybody's attention, please? Obviously, the results are in. It's disappointing when you're looking to win the race, but I can tell you that there's nothing to be disappointed about as far as self-respect is concerned. The Village of Mamaroneck is fortunate enough to be part of the greatest experiment in the world, which is the democratic process. We certainly accept the decision of the voters in the Village of Mamaroneck. The interesting part is while there's a registration gap of almost 3 to 1, it was still fairly close. You're talking about a small percentage. So there is consideration there. Of course, you have to put in reality, we're talking about a presidential election where you'll have 3,500, win with 3,500 versus winning with maybe 1,800, 2,000. But the Village of Mamaroneck is still number one. Regardless what it is, I will continue to be the chief cheerleader for the Village of Mamaroneck along with Lou Santor as the deputy mayor. And I look forward to working with the new compromise of the board. And I have the fullest confidence that there are 2 new additions to the board of trustees that hopefully they will be independent thinkers, and we will do one thing which anyone is qualified to do, to be on the board of trustees, which is deciding any issue, what is issue and what is best for the Village of Mamaroneck. I can tell you, it's my personal belief that we had 3 candidates that the village is temporarily missing out on their expertise, as noted in the debates and all the mailings and so on. They will continue to contribute to the Village of Mamaroneck. I congratulate you all. You have done what very few people in this country do, run for public office, and you put yourself out. So I congratulate you. Congratulate your opponents, and we look forward to working with you. Thank you very much. You guys want to say something? That's fine. All right?
Okay, that's it. Good job. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, LMCTV.
Thank you. And thank you, LMC TV.
Thank you, guys.
Welcome back. That was the concession speeches, or at least the mayor's concession speech for the trustee candidates in the Village of Mamaroneck, Republican candidates. We're going to have the Democratic candidates in the studio with us a little bit later on. They don't have a very long way to go from Barley's, which is on the corner of Mamaroneck, right? It's a couple of feet up the road, which is very nice. I mean, this is the value of the Village of Mamaroneck. You know, I remember talking with people who would come here from other communities, you know, when I had young children and you'd go to a play group or whatever it was, and they said they'd love to come here because you could park your car once. And you could go to lunch on the avenue, you could take care of your whatever business you had at the post office, and go to the library and spend your afternoon. And not have to be dragging your kids in and out of cars. And I hadn't thought about it that way, but it is one of the very strong attributes in the Village of Mamaroneck.
And it's also a very good walking community. You can walk anywhere in the Village of Mamaroneck.
Well, you can. Most people don't.
Well, I used to, when I lived on Prospect Avenue, I walked all over the place. You know, and I walked to the village, and you know, it was just.
Well, I remember neighbors thinking I was quite remarkable because I walked to the train station from Orienta Avenue.
It was a trip.
Well, it's a mile.
Yeah.
And I didn't have to go to the gym that day, so I thought I covered all bases. As long as you're not wearing high heels or carrying heavy packages, and why not? I digress. When we left before, we were talking about early voting. I think it's 37 states now have early voting in our nation. Seems like a great idea.
Yes.
I just spoke with all my kids live all over the country, but I was speaking with my son in Washington State, and it was yesterday, and he hadn't remembered to mail in his ballot early enough, but you just drop it off at the library or various boxes set out around the community, and there's no problem with it. They only do mail-in voting, and it's only early. It has to be in before the date of the election.
Right.
Nobody waits on lines as we do. You were talking about the town center. Not a horrible place to wait online, and it was a beautiful day today.
It was 10 minutes, yeah.
And it was a beautiful day. But there are some times when it's not so beautiful and it's tough to be outside. Think of your friends in the city who wait online for an hour and sometimes longer.
And some of the people in, for some reason it always seems that the longest lines are in the poorest neighborhoods.
I think that's right.
And you see people waiting 2 and 3 hours to vote. And, God bless them for waiting.
But it shouldn't be that way.
It shouldn't be that way.
Why should people have to go through this?
But you know what? It's an amazing thing in this country in the past few years. In some sense, we've made voting easier, and in some sense, we've made voting harder. We've made voting easier by the states, like you said, that allow early voting, which I wish New York would. I don't see why the most progressive state, as we call ourselves in the nation, doesn't allow early voting. But so we have that on one hand. But then on the other hand, these laws have been passed that I can't think of any other reason than to keep people from voting.
Well, yes, voter suppression has been a very big issue.
And you notice a lot of them happened after the Supreme Court struck down the Voting Rights Act.
That's right.
And I don't think that's a surprise.
Well, I think it's a surprise to Justice Roberts, who said he didn't see the need for it anymore because there were no problems.
Yeah.
And I think we've seen that's not the case,
Right.
as there have been more and more assaults on people's ability to vote. What we don't realize here, many people live in very rural communities where they need early voting and more voting hours, even if they don't get to mail it in, but they have to travel.
Correct. And also, Alice, a lot of people are hourly wage earners.
Yes.
And if you tell a mother who has 2 kids she's trying to support by herself that she's got to wait 3 or 4 hours online and she's going to miss a day's pay, I can't blame her for not voting.
Yeah. But it shouldn't be a sacrifice.
No, it shouldn't be a sacrifice. It shouldn't. We should be making it easier.
How would the state adopt early voting laws? How does that start? How does it germinate?
I think it starts in the state legislature, and I think the Assembly has passed that law. It dies in the Senate, where so many good ideas go to die. The New York State Senate, and I can't think of a reason why you wouldn't want to do it.
The only reason is to suppress votes.
To suppress votes, yes. I mean, if I'm not sure of who I'm going to vote for a week before the election, I'll wait.
Right, you don't have to vote early, right?
This year I knew who I was voting for. Unless there was a homicide committed, that was about the only thing that was going to change my mind.
Do you think most people really do know?
I think most people do know, yes.
I think in this election...
And if you don't know, you wait until you know.
Right. Well, in this election, I think that everybody reached a saturation point. I mean, you knew who the candidates were.
Yeah.
And you knew your mind. I mean, there probably were very few people who were still undecided. But anyway, so the procedure to start the conversation about early voting would start in the state legislature.
So in the state legislature, yes.
And with the Assemblyman. I had Steve Otis here earlier, and I realized that I would have nailed him on it.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure Steve probably supports it.
Yeah.
But,
Well, but how do we get that conversation started, and how do we get legislation proposed? Because it's not going to happen overnight.
there's a lot of things that New York State does that are archaic. The way they let, small parties kind of sell their line.
Yeah, I want to talk more about that. I have some more results in the 37th Senatorial District, where George Latimer is facing a challenge from Julie Killian. And with 20% of districts reporting, George has an even stronger lead, or it still remains almost 100% lead, where Julie Killian has 9,647 votes. George has 15,033 votes. George Latimer, again, is the incumbent state senator, being challenged by Julie Killian, who, interestingly enough, comes from the city of Rye, where George does live. And he started out as a council person in the city of Rye.
I mean, I would put my money on George tonight. First, because
okay. Well, I have some new. So I have some new numbers here, and this may change everything. I don't want to really confuse things, but I'm told now that Julie Killian has 29,000. That the numbers we were given was incorrect. 29,647 votes, and that George has 15,033 votes. Now, that seems to be correct now. This is 20% of districts reporting. So it looks like George is actually facing a very stiff challenge.
Well, like I said, depends where they're coming from.
It depends.
If they're coming from Yonkers, and that seems like a lot of votes, though.
It does seem like a very large margin, which means that...
Not even a large margin. It seems like a lot of votes. It seems like a lot of votes for the 20%. You know what I mean? It just seems.
No, it's not. Yeah,
that's not right. We're getting new information.
You know what? We're getting different information.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to muddy the water because I really don't want to do that. But apparently the numbers are being reconfigured.
We'd quickly run out of people.
Yeah.
There
has to be some problem.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're not even going to go there. So the senatorial race is still up for grabs. Nobody's crying yet.
Nobody's crying.
No.
And you know, from past history and this being a presidential year, I would put my money on George big time.
Well, I think George has been a long time and very highly regarded representative. I mean, I don't think there's a harder working person in the world. I mean, he manages to cover this huge district and appear at everybody's important meeting or function, even some non-important meetings. He's quite a remarkable guy. But Julie Killian makes a very, very strong presentation as well. She's a very bright, very attentive woman who's really starting out the right way on council, and she seems to have done a lot of very important things for the city of Rye. So, you look at those kinds of things, and just our adversarial system pits people against each other where you want to see them work in collaboration, because I think from what I've learned, they actually agree on a great deal more than they disagree.
Okay. But, we have to have elections. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Yeah, so, and good for Ms. Killian for stepping up and running, because I'll tell you, one of the things I miss being in the town of Mamaroneck is contested elections.
Okay. I've just gotten confirmation that the original numbers were correct.
Okay.
So that we're going to revert back to Julie Killian's 9,647 votes to George Latimer's 15,033 votes. Sorry, folks. But that appears to be correct. We're trying to do the right thing for you. But, when it's a lot to tally in one night.
It is. And you know what? The networks make mistakes, so we could forgive LMC TV for,
everybody's
transposing a number.
Oh, my gosh, trying really hard. Do you think that with this, in the context of the presidential election and the tremendous polarization of this country, I mean, I think a lot's been said. We can't even talk to each other, and people who feel differently. It's not a question of we're arguing about a particular policy or we like this or we don't like that. People are absolutely shut down. You're for us or against us. Do you think that filters down to local elections? That kind of sentiment and.
I'd like to think not. But I've seen some of it. But what I tell people, especially if a person's running for office, I tell them, listen, at the end of the day, you're going to see that person in the supermarket. You might be sitting next to that person in church. You're going to see each other on the soccer field or the baseball field. Your kid might marry that guy's kid. So you know what? And also, in a village, a lot of times, on the issues, you might be on the same side with that person that you ran against, fighting a development or trying to get a field for kids to play on. So you know what? Take a step back. You know what I mean? And I think, nationally they have to take a step back too. I think I blame the media a lot, because the media it's always, they're always depicting it as a dog race, and this one is now ahead and this one slams that one. And it's all about their ratings, and there's really no substance anymore. If you watched, the cable news networks, there's absolutely no substance. It's all about, what did this guy say about this guy today? It's almost like the network news has become a reality show.
But I think you're right.
Cronkite would be turning over in his grave.
I think you're right about that. But what about the impact of social media?
That's very corrosive, because anybody could put out any sort of nonsense.
Anything. And it can't possibly be vetted.
Yeah.
And I think it was Politico couldn't even keep up.
Yeah.
To try to disclose the lies. And
There's an old saying that's even more true now. A lie goes around the world before the truth gets its pants on. And but it is an old saying. I'm an old guy, but I think that is really true in spades with the internet. I mean, I see some of the things that people put up on both sides, and oftentimes I'll personally message that person. I'm saying, did you check this out? Because this doesn't seem right to me. It just doesn't seem that this could be. And we want to believe our own story.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Well, in Westchester, the League of Women Voters used to have a forum. I don't remember what they called it, but basically talk about truth in advertising or truth in elections.
Oh, the campaign fair practices.
Fair practices.
That's still in.
I mean, can they even? Do they throw up their hands? How do you function?
Well, you know what? Here's the thing about the campaign fair practice. You know, it's well intentioned.
Okay.
But at the end of the day, all I can do is say you shouldn't have done that.
Okay.
You know,
Right.
there's no sanctions. There's no, and you know, usually if the other side thinks what they're doing is effective, even though it's not true, they're going to say, yeah, we believe it's true.
Yeah.
And, you know,
so they cover themselves. You know, Tom, we have the tapes of the Democratic acceptances.
I'd like to see it.
So we'd like to see those, and then the candidates will be in shortly. So, but we're going to ask you to stay right there for a little while, as always. So let's go to the tape of the Democratic candidates giving their acceptance speeches.
Us. This is a great evening for us as Democrats and a great evening, hopefully, for the village of Mamaroneck. I think you have seen the results here, which is a pretty resounding a statement made by so many people in the village. An amazing turnout today, one of the biggest turnouts I think that the village has ever seen. And there's obviously a clear statement that has been made tonight that what people want in this village is values like the values that they have. And those are values of courtesy, civility, and respect for each other as trustees, and respect for the village residents, respect for people that attend in the boardroom. And we promise that we will actually do that for us because clearly we have a mandate to deliver on those promises. It is we feel humbled and honored to be selected by the village of Mamaroneck to be your next 3 trustees. It's been a great pleasure of mine to work with these 2 fellas here. We've worked as a team. We've showed that, quite honestly, common sense, thinking about solutions, and bringing in the community on those decisions because you own this community, you own this village, and we're just here to help you make those decisions on your behalf. So I would like to say that we will work as hard as we can to repay the trust you've just given us tonight, and we'll do our best to do that. Thank you so much.
Well, I first of all want to thank all the volunteers because what you've done, not only for the campaign, but for the community, for all of us, so that we could continue in the campaign. We could continue working, all those people who made phone calls, wrote letters, knocked doors. This really belongs to all of you. That silent work that all of you do, again, we're going to try to repay you working seriously, civilly, work hard to defend a lot of those values and principles and just the basic things you need to do for a community to continue to thrive and to have just the comfort of going to your work, coming back home, sending your kids to school, and knowing that you have serious people in the board working for you and listening to you. We're going to be there working hard, as Keith said, to work and do anything you would like us to do to make this community better. So I want to thank everybody, but in particular, there's 3 ladies that I really want to mention by name.
Just 3? Just
3 today. And I'm not going to use the N word or any other kind of N for N. And Randy and Kelly and Elizabeth, you have been the ladies not just behind this gentleman, but ahead of us, leading us. Thank you. And for all the ladies out there at home for my daughter, my strongest supporter, and all the women who have helped and are going to make this night different. Hopefully, it turns out well for everybody. Thank you very much.
And I just, sorry, I'd be really remiss if I didn't thank my wife and my 2 boys for all their support. Thank you.
He can go home again. So I would like to thank Trustees Finch and Miller, because without their support, we wouldn't have had the 2 propositions on the ballot for the voters of this village to vote resoundingly in favor of greater representation, more democracy in choosing the village attorney and choosing who the land use on the ZBA and planning board members will be. That's critical vote across every election district. They said, yes, we want more representation, fair representation, not just one person making decisions. So that's something that Trustees Miller and Finch can take with them as having been responsible for making the village a better place going forward. Thank you all.
By miraculous intentions, we have the candidates with us now. It's a good thing we live in the little village of Mamaroneck and you guys didn't have to skate too far up the hill. Congratulations to all of you. Leon, on your election to a 3rd term.
Yes, indeed.
Okay, you are a glutton for punishment. Okay, well, we want to hear all about that and why you want to continue. Victor, your first election, and congratulations, Keith, to you as well. Now, one thing I remarked on it, as I said, we're old friends, even though you haven't met me, because I watch everything you do, everything. Technology allows me to go home with you sometimes. You 2 are new to this country. You are not born here.
Relatively new, yes. I've been in Mamaroneck for 18 years.
Okay.
I was born in Edinburgh. I was raised in Nigeria. I was educated in England.
Well, you covered the globe.
Yeah, so international, which is actually a reflection of the village now a bit more, much more diverse than it used to be. Yeah.
Well, I have to say I lived here for 35 years, and we chose it because of its diversity. And of course, it's become more diverse over the years, but we always had a very international flavor. But you are a naturalized citizen?
Have to be, yeah. Otherwise,
I know
otherwise
that.
it would be a problem.
So how long are you a citizen?
10 years. Got my
Congratulations.
citizenship, the whole family, 10 years ago. Very proud.
We're very proud of you. And Victor, you are a relative newcomer?
Relatively, yes. I've been a U.S. citizen for 2 years, so that's new. My first vote for presidential election today, I voted twice already in the village elections, since we have one every year.
Yes. But this was your first presidential election?
Yes. I've been here. It took me 15 years to become a U.S. citizen. I came to the U.S. to study. Then I continued working, took the long road, and I'm originally from Colombia, and very happy, and again, because this is a diverse village, and I get to talk a lot in Spanish, and that's wonderful, and well, that's part of the excitement to also be part of that voice, hopefully at the board.
Well, I don't want to drop this conversation. We have more to talk about. But Leon, I also learned that you were not born in the United States.
I've been a citizen for only 45 years.
Well, considering that you're only 48. That's okay, we'll be kind to each other.
No, so I was born in Israel and came here when I was 11.
This is quite remarkable, especially in the context of the national conversation about immigration. And I commend you all for your participation in government and in your communities, considering you didn't hail from this place.
Thank you.
And didn't have to do that. Now tell me, Victor, what motivates you to set yourself up as a trustee at this moment in your life? Maybe not a best turn of a phrase, but you've got a pretty busy life. You have a young family.
Right. Yes, in the back of my mind, because I'm interested I'm really public interest oriented. That's why I like.
You have your background's in environmental.
Right, and I had worked in local government before coming to the U.S. So I have that interest, but it was really in the back of my head, and I thought at some point maybe I'll get interested. It was really a meeting on flooding at the Board of Trustees that really checked me and said, this is a complicated project. This is a federal project. We need to manage it properly, and I started talking to some friends and people saying, you know, we need to get this right, and that started a conversation that ended up in an interview, and then I said, you know, let's just go for it and try to work and collaborate with these two gentlemen who are very experienced, and I think teaming up makes sense, and putting some ideas and work behind them, that probably is going to help us deal with the complications we have managing certain
Well, your
topics.
expertise is sorely needed in the village, for sure, and that debunks my theory that Leon offered to pay for college for one of your kids to get you to run. I guess that wasn't going to be the case. Now, Keith, what motivated you to run?
A number of things. I am currently chair of the budget committee for the village, and I'm on the industrial area advisory committee.
Okay, now, Leon, you started on the budget committee, as I
Indeed.
recall,
Yes.
in the village as well.
Yes.
So did you two know each other from that experience?
Not too well. We knew of
we
each
didn't
other.
overlap.
I didn't overlap.
No.
Okay.
No. So I'd started to sort of do some work, community work, volunteer work, and was enjoying that. But I realized that really to make the real decisions, you have to be a trustee. So that's why I chose to run. I think both my boys have gone through the Mamaroneck school system. They're out the other side and they're working in the city, and I felt it was time to give something back to the community, and that's why I'm doing it.
And your wife's probably happy to have you out of the house a couple of nights a week. Is that?
Well, no, actually,
Oh,
I think
sorry.
she's out of the house more than I am. So she works in the city. So.
Okay. Well, I just find community involvement can really absorb a great deal of your time, with great benefit to everybody around. But the nice thing about the village is you're not going very far, so you don't have long drives home at night after long village meetings. The tone in the village board these days is not quite what it used to be. And I think, you know, again, in the context of the national election, we see sort of reduction in civility. Am I saying that accurately? How do you think you're going to cope with those kinds of conditions, that kind of climate? Keith, why don't you
Yeah, I
take
mean,
that
one
first?
of our planks on our platform has been civility and respect at all levels, not just between the trustees, but actually in terms of how we treat the residents of Mamaroneck. And so one of the things we really want to do is to make sure that we start to set a tone from the top when it comes to how we want board meetings to be undertaken, as well as how we treat residents. And we hope that the three of us as a majority will be able to start to reflect that in meetings. It's very important, I think.
Well, it looks like you had a decisive victory. It didn't. I mean, turnout was very high, and that's what we expect in a national election, a presidential election. But there's no ambiguity here. I mean, a couple of absentee ballots aren't going to change the results of this election. It's a very clear and decisive victory for you. Do you get any sense from your moving around the community? Because here you actually go door to door and meet people on the avenue. It's not all social media and tweeting and Facebook. Do you get any sense of what people's concerns are, Victor?
Yes, and well, of course, parking remains an issue that needs to be resolved.
Is that what you're hearing from people in the community?
That's one.
When they
and
say parking, are they talking about the parking meters?
parking meters on the avenue is still an issue there.
Because parking has been a conversation here forever. There's never enough parking.
So it's not off the table. So it remains. It's going to stay there. There are some interesting developments in the industrial area. But again, walking, you get to talk to people who tell you, well, there's a transfer station. So the transfer station and the waste and the smell in the summer, and then you start kind of getting a better understanding of the conflicts and the problems that we're going to need to address to make this interesting and positive developments really happening. Development overall, I think, is the number one issue. And enforcement, better functioning departments, building departments. I think that's something here. So we're going to collaborate, work with staff, and bring our 2 cents. I think People want, you just asked about how to get together on the board. I think at least there's 2 new faces. So starting day 1, we were going to make it clear that we really want to collaborate. Right? And with Leon, we've been working together. So now we just have to reach out a little more and work with the mayor and with Luz and Toro. And I think we're really committed to, to get a lot of consensus. Hopefully we will.
Well, I think that's very optimistic, and I hope that you are correct, and that I look forward to watching board meetings again. Leon, what did you find when you were going around the village? I mean, you've been on the board for 4 years. And you see people come sometimes at their most exercised moments when they come before the board. They're very ardent about a particular issue. But in going around the community, did you hear anything that surprised you?
People are a lot calmer than what we hear at the board meetings. And as a board member, you hear people coming with very strong opinions, and one of the tasks is to make a judgment: is this person speaking for themselves, for a small minority, or for the community as a whole? And how do you weigh these views as, overall? Do you give it a lot of weight or a little weight? And that's the challenge. And so walking door to door, you hear opinions and you weigh those with what you hear with people coming to the board. So, for example, we've had the issue of the residential parking zone, which we established as a result of state legislation, which gave us home rule to be able to create a zone around the train station to restrict parking to residents. And so we implemented the law, and as we've walking around, we heard from people, and people came to our board meetings to say, you didn't quite get it right for us. And so we need to figure out, how do we get it right for people on Melbourne, people on Union, people on Washington Street? So it may not be the same answer for every street, and that's part of what we need to figure out. How do we make it work for everyone?
Do you think that local government has more flexibility, certainly, than state government or county government to get it right? I mean, you've created a residential parking situation, which was actually sought after for a long time in the village. People who were very compromised. And I think it was Avalon Willow. I mean, I'd sat on the planning board when that was approved, and nobody expected the impact on the community. We thought we'd covered everything, but nobody knew people were going to have 3 cars and that they weren't going to buy parking spots because they were charging too much. They'd get one with the apartment, and nobody intended for the negative impact on the community. So residential permits were sought after, and it was a long time coming. But as you say, sometimes you don't get it right. In a local government like this, does it have to be so divisive? What we hear is, people screaming or yelling, and what you're expressing to me is a much more mediated, congenial approach to, okay, let's tweak it a bit.
It's a problem-solving approach. Essentially, our job is to problem solve for our residents, to look ahead, to have a vision of what we're looking for, and what makes sense for the residents long term. We have a new development will come in, Sheldrake Lofts on Waverly, right off Waverly, which will be 100 new units. What impact will that have? And the job is to problem solve, and you don't get it right necessarily the first time, but that doesn't mean you start throwing tomatoes at folks who tried to come up with a solution, but you try to figure out what's the next step. How do we tweak it to make it better?
Do you find the vote is an affirmation of that attitude of let's keep working to get it right?
I think it's a vote for a vision of working practically, sensibly, and trying to come up with solutions and involving the community in our decisions. That's what we take.
We're almost at the end of our time together. Lightning round. I'm going to ask you one point that you want to work on, or one issue you want to work on or make your priority in the first days as you take your seat as trustee. Keith?
I feel very passionate about the industrial area and what we can do there, and the vision there is amazing, and I think it would be terrific if we can really see through the vision.
Okay. Victor?
I'm going to work on a sustainability initiative. I'm going to at least started. Sustainability is a process. So hopefully the Committee for the Environment takes some of that, and there's a water quality work we need to do. So those are going to be.
But we heard that
topics.
Mamaroneck's getting some money from grants that Steve Otis has obtained for us. So
right.
If he doesn't come, you tell him I heard. I told you.
All right, will do.
Leon.
So the local waterfront revitalization plan is about to be approved. It'll be approved this next month, and one of the recommendations from it is the Water Quality Committee to have a committee of residents sort of on top of that issue. So that's very important. And the other is, addressing the downtown parking issue. We've been trying to solve it. We're waiting for the committee we formed to give us recommendations, and then to work with those recommendations and the merchants to find the optimal solution for our residents, our businesses, our visitors in a way that will make sense.
Okay, well, I want to congratulate you all on your election. I look
Thank
forward
you.
to
Thank you.
watching you work more and having you back to talk about all that you are achieving. Please stay right with me. I'm going to say a hearty thanks to all the folks behind the scenes who make us look as good as we do, and to thank everybody for their hard work in putting this show together. Congratulations to all the candidates, winners and losers. I'm Alice Bloom. We'll see you next time.